Hi, thanks so much for this opportunity. It's my first time on this side of a webinar, so I'm quite excited. I'm going to be talking about the MAMI WATA project. You'll see the website details up at the top. You'll also see during the presentation that the role of IOI and myself is only a part of a bigger project, so you may want to get hold of the other project partners directly. And all that information, as well as other useful resources and examples, are available on the website. I'll display the details again at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So the project aims to develop an integrated ocean management approach for West, Central, and Southern Africa. It's funded by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety, and managed by Grid Arendelle and the Abidjan Convention Secretariat. It's using 3 pilot countries, Benin, Ivory Coast, and Ghana, and 3 tools, EPSIS, SOMS, and MSP. By embedding the project within the Abidjan Convention Secretariat, it helps them work towards their goal of integrated ocean management in the region by using the pilot countries as proof of concept and by building capacity within the region. Capacity development is a key component of the project, which also works with centers of expertise within the region to encourage expert knowledge exchange and knowledge sharing in the region. Next slide, please. So the centers of expertise each focus on one of the tools and work across all 3 of the pilot countries. The Center for Ecological Monitoring is based in Dakar and helps with the categorization of CBD's ecologically or biologically significant areas, or EPSIS. The Environmental Protection Agency in Freetown, Sierra Leone, is working with the countries to develop State of the Marine Environment Reports, or SOMS. And my organization, the International Ocean Institute, is based in Cape Town, South Africa, and we are working with the countries to develop marine spatial plans. The project has put together toolkits for each of the 3 tools that are designed to provide practical and regional examples to support the implementation of integrated ocean management in the region. These documents are also available on the MAMI WATA website. Next slide, please. The 3 pilot countries are central to the project, and the project's activities are led by the implementing agencies in the countries, so that all activities meet the real needs of the countries. It also takes a hands-on approach. It isn't about ticking boxes for having run a certain amount of training workshops, but rather about working with the institutions actually responsible for ocean management in the 3 countries to learn while doing their work, and therefore it creates institutional capacity and experience for integrated ocean management. There are also training workshops, which are valuable pieces of the puzzle, and these are both for the pilot countries and other countries in the region. The most recent, a Blue Planning in Practice workshop, was held in Sao Tome in February of this year. One of the important considerations of this project, which is a challenge for me, is language. In Africa, as with anywhere, it's important to have the capacity to work in a language that is appropriate for the country. Luckily, IOI has the capacity to work in French and English, so Adnan, who is our director, worked closely with the French-speaking Benin and Ivory Coast, and I worked with the English-speaking Ghana. When working within the country with local stakeholders, it's also important to be able to do that in the local language. In South Africa, for example, there are 4 main languages spoken in the coastal provinces, and to be able to engage effectively with stakeholders, you need to have people who can translate the materials and present information in the relevant languages. My French is terrible, so that's not my job. Next slide, please. So this slide is to just summarize the 4 components of the project. I think it's fairly self-explanatory: develop tools, develop capacity, use the pilot projects as hubs, and shape policy frameworks. Next slide, please. Okay, so as mentioned, IOI came on board as a center of expertise for marine spatial planning in the beginning of 2019. We used a 10-step approach that's been outlined by the ISE, but given the time frame available, we wanted to emphasize the first 5 steps. We recognize that not all countries have all the data available for an idealistic quantitative MSP, but it's important to use the best available information and engage with stakeholders early on in the process. It doesn't matter how pretty the maps are or how perfect the data is if there's no buy-in from the stakeholders that use the resources and the marine spaces. You can't police it everywhere, so implementation of plans is more effective if the stakeholders involved understand why the rules exist and how their interests and futures are being protected. IOI used in-country workshops to engage with the implementing agencies in the 3 countries and mark progress. The timing of the workshops was determined by the countries. These workshops were then combined with field trips that engaged the local stakeholders at the sites of interest. The implementing agencies in the countries know best what the main or contentious issues are and who best to speak to and how to speak to them. The 10 steps are a generic approach, but they need to be supplemented with local understanding and knowledge to be effective. And this is best done by developing in-country capacity and institutional buy-in to the integrated ocean management approach. We're definitely not coming in and saying you have to do X, Y, and Z, but rather we are saying what do you need from us to achieve what you want to achieve? How can we help? Who can we bring in to help you get to where you want to be? Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I worked more closely with Ghana than the other 2 countries, so I wanted to tell you a little bit more about their progress. As you can see in this slide, a selection of the coast is highlighted in the red block. We were trying to be realistic about the expectations and advise that because of the time frame, it might be better to work towards a well thought out plan for a section of the coast rather than trying to develop one for the entire coast. So this is the Takoradi section of the coast. And in December last year, we were able to join the Ghana team for a stakeholder meeting in this region. You can see in the group photo below the impressive number of stakeholders they were able to bring together to inform about the project progress on all 3 of the tools. 9 potential EPSAs were identified. The pressures of the marine environment were outlined in the preliminary SOM report, and the Marine Spatial Development Framework was presented. Initial data and the legal framework were explained to the stakeholders, as was the rationale for using the 3 tools. The 3 tools can be combined in a very real way in that the EPSA and SOM data can feed into the MSP data. After all, once you've identified the pressures on the environment and sensitive or important areas, you need to develop a plan to protect or mitigate against impact. And part of that plan is to manage the use of that area through spatial management plans. One of the crucial challenges is how to incorporate the data and information from the local stakeholders, who might not have quantitative information, but whose input is crucial to the effectiveness of MSP. The project recently organized an introduction to Sea Sketch, and this might be an interesting tool to help incorporate this qualitative information. Training in these practical tools are a useful component of the project. Next slide, please. So I've only been involved in this project since the beginning of last year, and I suspect there are many more lessons I need to learn, as do we all. It helps to be realistic about what you can achieve and starting with easy wins and realistic goals so that stakeholders can see it isn't all pie in the sky ideas. MSP is about adaptive management. It needs to be constantly revisited and adapted. So you shouldn't expect it to be perfect on the first go, but learn while you're developing it. This also means not waiting for the perfect product before communicating with your stakeholders. After all, if you're not going to adjust your product based on the stakeholder input, then there's no point in collecting their input. It's important to be flexible. It's also important to think about how you can monitor and evaluate your plans once they're in place. This isn't part of the first 5 steps, but I think it's something to think about from the very beginning. Finally, it is worth keeping in mind that MSP is not a fix-all. It's part of a suite of tools that all work together for integrated ocean management, and not all of those tools are spatial. However, MSP can be particularly useful in areas where there is a specific conflict or area of contention. I personally think that with all the tools, but especially MSP, communication is everything. You need to build relationships with stakeholders and communicate with them in an effective and sensitive way. And this will differ in different countries and with different stakeholders. It is also important that their interests are heard and that they can see that in the plans. Effective communication builds trust. It helps with buy-in of all the stakeholders. It is not easy, it is not quick, but it is essential. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's me. Thank you for your time. And there are the contact details again if you want to get in touch with the project or with us at IOI. And thanks.